Coming up next from the Grassy Knoll, a terrifying look into the Orwellian world of brainwashing, disinformation, and ultimately control over you.
Hello again. Welcome to another segment of the Grassy Knoll on this Friday, July 2nd, 2004. This is our Dependence Day show. I'm Vyzygoth. Harry's out there somewhere in the rain. And again, we warn everybody and also our guest that we've been getting hit quite frequently with lightning strikes. And so if you hear us go down, we'll try to get back in again, but things get a little strange around here in the summertime. We have as our guest documentary filmmaker Chris Pinto. He'll be with us for the full 2 hours. He has produced the film Megiddo, The March to Armageddon, and he's been on the show before. Archives of all shows can be accessed only at VyzygothsGrassyKnoll.org. And also, and I'm saying this and also because we were down for 2 weeks, we made some arrangements, and as a result, you can also go to the archives on shows.VyzygothsGrassyKnoll.org. All right? The Knoll site has been down for 2 weeks. It was attacked. The server was attacked, the host of our websites, with a denial of service. It's over with, but that's what was taking place. Now, you can also access recent shows on radio, the numeral 4, all.net. That's radio4all.net. You can also listen to past Grassy Knoll shows and other alternative programming on Live 365. Go to pascoradio.org and check out the schedule. Recently, Harry, whose site that is, has been running Knoll all night from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. We are streaming on pascoradio.org. Click on Listen Live and you got it. Now, we are messaging again. You can send an IM, an instant message, to ask a question or make a comment at this AOL IM address. It is AM 1350 WDCF. Lastly, the views expressed on the Grassy Knoll are not necessarily those of the management, staff, or advertisers of WDCF, WZHR, and the Tan Talk Network. And now to our guest, Chris Pinto. Chris, welcome back to the Knoll.
Thanks a lot for having me, Viz. It's good to be here.
All right, I'm glad you feel that way. The last time we spoke about the contents of the film, Megiddo, The March to Armageddon, and we'll do it again this evening. But we're also going to discuss a couple other topics. And Chris, what is it that you wanted to address primarily?
Well, what you and I talked about earlier about a lot of the information concerning the Founding Fathers, especially with the 4th of July coming up, it seems like an appropriate topic. But it's something I've been doing a lot of research into for Megiddo Part 2, dealing with the issue of the New Age and just considering where the idea of the New Age came from as opposed to the Old Age. What was the Old Age and what was the standard by which the Old Age was governed or lived by? And so, the traditional teaching among New Agers is that the Old Age is the Pisces Age, which they call the Age of Christianity, and that age is coming to an end and that we're moving into the new Aquarian Age, supposedly, which is the age of man's supposed enlightenment, where man becomes Superman. And so what we're doing in Megiddo Part 2 is sort of tracking the history of this from a Western perspective. Of course, we could go back thousands of years. We go all the way back to the Tower of Babel and so on. But I'm trying to sort of contain it within what's happened here in America for the past few hundred years. And it's pretty fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Is this also going to be the at the core of your second? Now, you're going to do a documentary series that's going to run about, what, 5 segments?
Right. There's going to be about 5 documentaries or 5 videos, 5 parts to it. Part 1 dealt with sort of an introduction to Bible prophecy and then showing how Bible prophecy ties in with the conspiracy movement surrounding the New World Order. And then Part 2 deals with the New Age movement and a lot of the conspiracy elements that deal with that. And, of course, we talk about it from a biblical perspective. But then there's also a lot of information that comes out from an historical perspective. What is the real history of these things? And where the Founding Fathers are concerned, it's been very challenging trying to figure out exactly who these guys were. Some people say they were Bible-believing, convicted Christians. Some people say that they weren't really, that they had a sort of deistic, universalist view of God and religion. Some of them, about some of them it said that they shunned the idea of religion and government. They insisted upon this supposed wall between church and state. And it's very tricky trying to wade through the historical information and try to figure out who's telling the truth and what exactly the truth is. When these men talk about God, what do they mean? Are they talking about the God of the Bible, or is it an other view of God that they really believe and that really represents what they stood for? In fact, you and I kind of got on this when I contacted you about this quote from Alex de Tocqueville,
right,
the French ambassador, the French guy who came over to America to investigate our prison system. That much seems to be true. But then there's a quote that's attributed to him where he talks about looking for the genius and greatness of America, and he looked for it in, her commodious harbors and her Constitution and all this kind of stuff. And he says over and over again, but, the secret of her genius was not there. And then he says, supposedly, not until I went into the churches of America, and heard her pulpits flame with righteousness, then did I understand the secret of her genius and power. And the famed quote is, America is good because America is great. And if America ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. Powerful quote, but did he really say it?
Right. And I can't tell you that it might not be in another one of his works, but when I did check out the title, and it's got democracy in it, I've forgotten what the full title is.
He did say that, but I've read a lot of his stuff. Yeah. De Tocqueville?
Yeah, now, did you hear that particular quote that Chris was...
I've read that quote.
All right, there you go. I looked in for it, and did you have the title of that, Chris?
I found that quote in
Esperson's book, right?
Ralph Epperson's book on the New World Order, but he doesn't give a footnote for the quote. That's the thing. Epperson's a great researcher, at least from what I've read so far, but he just doesn't give us a footnote.
Yeah, my mind's blank on the title, but there were several books about the American experience. He also attributed Americans' women to the success of this country also.
Oh, so you're saying that quote is a legitimate quote?
Yes, it is.
That's in Democracy in America?
Yes, it is.
All right. No, I did not find it because I did a find on the page for a number of things and did not come up with that under church.
I think I've got it.
All right. So hold the presses there, Chris.
Wow.
And let's see if Harry has stated it. So it's up to Harry to find it.
I'm almost certain it's because there was a couple of books I've read by him, and it's been quite some time. But the Democracy in America also made the statement that the strength, as I just said, some of the strengths of this country lie in its women as compared to European women.
Right. All right. So keep that in abeyance, and we'll see if we can clear this matter up for you.
That would be awesome if he really, because I love the quote.
Oh, yes.
It's such a beautiful quote, and but then there's even apart from this quote, there's many others that are attributed, and the debate goes back and forth. Did these men really say it? And even if they did say it, like for example, you have a guy like Thomas Jefferson, who's often quoted for quoting the Bible and quoting things concerning God and so on. But was Jefferson talking about the God of the Bible? When he mentions Jesus, is he talking about the Jesus of the Bible? Jefferson wrote his own version of the Bible,
right,
where he deletes all of the information about the virgin birth, about the resurrection, things having to do with the miracles of Christ, and so on. And he seems to, at least from the letters that he wrote about him, he seems to suggest that these things are the product of very inferior minds, that they're sort of fantastical elements that were added on after the fact and are not a true representation of the man Jesus. And so he felt his task was to pull out the true teachings of Jesus, which were basically his humanistic morality, and to shun anything that he thought was fantastical, any references to supernatural or, the miracles of God or resurrection and things like that. And so when people quote Jefferson as though he were a Bible-believing Christian, it seems clear that it's not a full representation of what Jefferson believed. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. And I think all of us believe that Jefferson was much more worldly and secular and probably more given to the writings of Hobbes than necessarily the prophets of the Old Testament or any of the apostles.
Yeah. I mean, when my wife got her master's degree from the University of Virginia, so I went out there to see her a couple of years ago graduate, and we took a trip up to Monticello, which is Jefferson's home. And as we were leaving Monticello, we drove past the Jefferson family graveyard, and there was this what looked like a large black obelisk, jutting up from the graveyard. And the bus driver, who was driving the bus, pointed out, and he said, "Well, that's Jefferson family graveyard." And I looked over there, and he stopped for a minute, and I said, and he pointed out that was Jefferson's tombstone. And I said, "Really?" And I said, now who designed that tombstone? And of course, they're in Virginia. If you go there, they're very proud of Thomas Jefferson. Mm-hmm. And they said, "Oh, he designed it himself. He designed it himself."
Attaboy.
And we actually show in Megiddo Part 1, we show I found it online, his Jefferson's design for his obelisk. Well, I mean, if this guy was a Bible-believing Christian guy, why would he erect the symbol of Baal, and the sun god of the ancient world? Why would he erect that as his tombstone?
There's always room for Freemasonry.
Yeah.
And did you not? Well, there's a story also that he accepted the plates for what would later become our national symbol, the truncated pyramid, from a representative of Adam Weishaupt. I can't confirm that, but I'm sure that in those years, Chris, that they were very much in correspondence with one another.
Plus, I don't think that historically that Jefferson ever panned himself off as being a devout Christian.
Yeah, he says, I found a quote from him some time ago where he talks about how he believed that he was a denomination unto himself, that he didn't know anybody that quite believed the way that he did, certainly not in the churches and so on. But his communication with Weishaupt, William Still talks about that in his book on the New World Order, how Jefferson actually defended Weishaupt, and he spoke out against people who were exposing Weishaupt at that time. So Jefferson was defending the guy. Still also attributes that it was Jefferson who changed the original American motto, which had been life, liberty, and property, because private property ownership through the Plymouth Foundation was part of what really compelled Americans to work, once they realized they weren't in a communal setting as in the Jamestown colony, but if the old biblical principle, you do not work, you shall not eat. So if you work and you labor, the fruit of your labor, your household is able to enjoy. And this is what compelled so many people to labor in early America, and it's what led to the explosion of American immigrants, at least from what Still writes in his book. Well, life, liberty, and property had been the American motto, but then when Jefferson began, getting involved in these early American writings, he apparently is the one who changed it or manipulated it into life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And Weishaupt, it's interesting because part of Weishaupt's program for bringing about the New World Order was the abolishment of private property. Okay?
Yep.
And so it seems that, if Jefferson did have this communication with Weishaupt, that he was influenced by that idea of getting rid of private property ownership, and so he manipulated the American phrase, into life, liberty, and let's get rid of property and let's just pursue happiness.
Let me ask you a question. If he was bent on the elimination of property, why would he have advanced the concept of the patent office where people could license even intellectual property?
Okay, now say that again.
Thomas Jefferson was the guy that advanced the concept of the U.S. Patent Office because he thought even intellectual property was property, inventions and things of that nature, and if he was anti-property ownership, he certainly wouldn't have done that.
Interesting. There's a guy named Jim Zalanka who's got a radio ministry. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he actually talked about the whole idea of copyright and so on, and how Jefferson... I've read some quotes now from Jefferson, and I'd honestly have to do more research on it. I'm not familiar with what you're referring to, but he talked about just the idea of copyright, and he really seemed, I don't know, from the quotes I've read, he seemed to be against it, almost as though once you put a thought or an idea out there, how can you really say that it belongs to you? You know, how can you say that it's your own thing because you put it out there and now other people have access to it? And, you know, don't they have the right to make use of it as well? I don't know. I'd have to track down that quote, though, in all honesty.
Maybe paranoid. It doesn't mean they're not out to get you. The Grassy Knoll continues.
Yes, go ahead.
Am I on the air?
Yeah, you're on the air, unfortunately.
Is that off of Tapestry?
That would be right. One of the best-selling albums ever.
And I think it stayed in the Billboard Top 100 longer than any album ever. It took years for it to drop out of the 100 spot.
Your knowledge of myopia.
Useless information.
It's astounding.
Actually, back years ago, we were tracking it. I mean, it had already been in the charts for like 5 or 6 years, and it would be 46 one week, and then it'd be back up to 90, down to 92, then back up again. So don't forget our internet friends too.
Yeah, we want to thank a lot of people who have been listening, as many as they can on the real-time stream, which is happening now, and also those who are listening in archives. People like Irene out in Ohio and Marula out in British Columbia.
It's cold up there, too.
It's always cold up there. That's why they're Canadians. Also, Chicago Eddie.
Yep.
And our buddy out there, Arnie. Also, a number of people from Texas, Benny and Charles.
A lot of people from Austin, Texas lately, too.
I noticed them
at home of you-know-who, so
right.
I think that's interesting.
Well, you got Jones down there also. There's a couple of people. So, we thank you for doing that. Also, we want to remind you once again that Great Thai Restaurant will be closed until Monday, July 19th, so don't go down there like Harry will probably do as
Too late.
Before.
Too late.
All right.
Did it today.
Before we engage Chris with what he's speaking about today and also with his films, this came out of the Associated Press yesterday, and we've been talking about this for over a year. Not that we originated it, but because we were aware of it and we did talking up.
Well, let's take some credit. Maybe we did originate it.
Then no one's going to believe it.
Well,
don't consider the source.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. AP out of Washington. The government needs to establish guidelines for canceling or rescheduling elections if terrorists strike the United States again, says the chairman of the new Federal Voting Commission. Such guidelines do not currently exist, said DeForest B. Sori's head of the voting panel. And it goes on and on and on. Another quote, it says, I am still awaiting their response, he said. Thus far, we have not begun any meaningful discussion. Chris, I don't know if you're aware of this, but in your circles, have you entertained at all the possibility that is another attack against our government, our constitutional republic, that is, not the people who are there, that there might be a unprecedented suspension of the presidential elections? Have you come across that at all?
I haven't come across that specifically. There's an interesting story that I was told when I interviewed William T. Still. His father apparently was served in pretty high up in the government. I'm not sure in what capacity, but he was I think he was a military man, and he served in the government during the Nixon administration and was made privy to a coup d'etat that was being planned, supposedly, to give Nixon a third term in the White House, and it had to do with the upcoming election and whatnot, and it was apparently people who wanted to keep Nixon in power, and he was invited to be a part of this coup d'etat to and they had this elaborate plan worked out and whatnot, but of course he was a loyal American man, so he said he sort of pretended to go along with it and then changed his mind. Didn't change his mind, but he pretended to go along with it, and then he wrote a full report on it, sent it off, and apparently nothing ever came of it. And this is the story that William T. Still tells about how he got involved in his research. So it would seem that I've also read articles in the past about a plot to take the White House during FDR's administration, which I'm not overly familiar with these events, but I've read about them. So it doesn't. What you're describing to me doesn't sound like a completely, unique idea. It's the sort of thing that has happened on and off in our government. I think maybe since the very beginning of the government. I mean, there are things that you read about in early America when the Jacobins came over after the French Revolution and were trying to foment agitation in America to turn the citizenry against the government, much like they had done in France. And it's what the according to William Still, it's what the Alien and Sedition Acts were about. They were to push those guys out of the country, or to cripple their ability to have an overwhelming or too much of an influence in America.
Also, if I'm not mistaken, Charles T. Wilcox, who wrote Democracy Under Siege, and also Eric John Phelps, who wrote Vatican Assassins, I think saw that Jacobin influx and influence as an extension of Jesuitical provocateuring. Any thoughts on that?
I would generally agree with those guys. That's something that I've done the research on it. I'm trying to be careful about how to unfold that part of it, because it's the way that I learned the stuff on the Jesuit order and the Vatican and their influence is I had encountered all of the conspiracy information. I wouldn't say all of it, but a lot of it for several years, and then started reading. I read Eric's book, and it's a whole chapter in American history that is somehow or other has been completely removed, or not completely, but largely removed from any record. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to. I was just going through my books today, Avro Manhattan's book, Vietnam, Why Did We Go? Okay, where he's basically talking about the motivation behind the Vietnam War came from the Roman Catholic Church. How many times do you hear that? You never hear any mention of the Pope compelling, Catholics in northern Vietnam to go down to South Vietnam so they could build up the Catholic congregation in that part of the world, and how President Diem was a diehard Catholic. He had a brother who was the head of the secret police, and then another one who was the archbishop of the region, and that what they were running in South Vietnam was like a Catholic dictatorship. Okay, but these are elements that we never hear about in any documentary. All the writings on Vietnam, you almost never see anything that pertains to the Catholic Church or to Francis Cardinal Spellman, even though the Vietnam War was referred to as Spelly's War, okay, or Spellman's War. Right. And yet this influence is somehow or other, it's very carefully removed. And so I don't know, just from the perspective of, representing the information to an audience, I'm trying to find a way to unfold it in an orderly manner so that it makes sense to people, because the stuff on Rome is so, to me, was just so shocking. When I came across Eric's book and other writings and realized all this stuff on the Jesuit order, I was literally just stunned for about 2 or 3 days. Because, go ahead.
Oh, no. Finish up your thought.
Yeah, I was stunned. I was just so, when I read Dave Hunt's book, A Woman Rides the Beast, I was raised Catholic. I think maybe this is part of the reason I was so shocked. And for a number of years thought that, Catholicism was an unbiblical religion, but I didn't, I just thought, well, you know what, there's so many churches that are off in different areas and whatnot. And when I read Dave Hunt's book, A Woman Rides the Beast, he spends a lot of time going over the history of the Catholic Church. And I came to believe that it is, it is the center of occultism on planet Earth. That's what I came to believe. And, reading passages in, I generally agree that the Catholic Church is Mystery Babylon the Great, which is, the belief that's been held by Bible-believing Christians for more than 1,000 years. The Reformers held that view. Men like Charles Haddon Spurgeon held that view. Martin Luther held that view. It's just a stunning view. And then you read in the book of Revelation where it talks about Babylon the Great and how she has become the habitation of devils and the hold of every foul spirit and every unclean and hateful bird, and that she's the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And then when you read Eric's book and you read Dave Hunt's book, it's just amazing the length and the depth and the reach of, the old saying, all roads lead to Rome, ends up having a very special significance when you understand the role that Romanism plays in the world conspiracy.
For those who have not heard us before or have not heard enough of us, we do believe that in this New World Order, which we believe to be the satanic reign that's prophesied, that the Vatican, not Roman Catholic believers necessarily, but the Vatican is an agent of this without a doubt. I do want to tell you something, though, Chris. When Bush went last to see the Pope, 6 weeks later we had 9/11. Now, he's gone again. He went again. And I'm not saying this for Harry, but for myself, 6 weeks from his last visit would be July 5th. So, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but whenever anyone goes to see the Pope, and I don't really think they're seeing the Pope. I think they're seeing probably the Black Pope, which is Kelvenbach, the head of the Jesuit order.
Right.
I'm thinking that they're getting things in line. And isn't it interesting, too, because the Pope doesn't necessarily come over to see Bush or any dignitaries here. You go over to see him.
Right.
In the Vatican.
Oh, he's an old guy. Come on, give him a break. The guy's like 85 or something like that?
Yeah, going on like 3,000.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for him to get around.
But at any rate, we're going to go to another commercial break, but I still want to get back to our discussion about property. I also don't want to get too far away from what you want to speak to, and also, if you would, Chris, if you could more or less give us a thumbnail of the entire series.
They're not out to get you. The Grassy Knoll continues.
Delivery guy.
Here we are back for our second half hour with Chris Pinto.
You didn't ask me what I thought about the song.
I did that for a reason. I don't want to hear what you think about the song.
See, I don't care about what those guys think because they're Canadians and they're in their trash and think, they trash. Colored lights may hypnotize, sparkle someone else's eyes.
Groovy. Chris, we have yes.
Are you there? Hello, Breaker.
Chris Pinto with us a second time around for him. And Chris, let's give some information about how people can get, at least the first part. And this is going to be a 5-part series. Am I right?
That's correct.
All right. Now, how can people get this? The first one that's out there right now, and it's out in both in VHS and DVD, is it not?
It is.
Okay. All right. Shoot us some ordering information, if you would.
Okay. If you want to order a copy of Megiddo on VHS or DVD, it's $19.95 plus $4.50 shipping and handling. $24.45. You can call toll-free 1-877-279-9422. 877-279-9422.
And for people... Oh, go ahead.
And you can also, if you want to go to our website, our web address is www.adullamfilms, and it's ADULLAMFILMS.org. Kind of a long web address we have, but that's the website. We've got Megiddo available there as well, and of course we take credit cards and that kind of thing.
And also we have a link. Finish out if you have another a venue where you're selling that.
No, I was gonna. No, those would be the two. I would say the toll-free number and our website would be the best way to get copies, or to find an address. We've got an address listed on our website if you want to write to us. Some people like to write in and like mail in a check and that kind of thing.
Right.
To order copies, so you can find that information there.
Also, we have a link to you on my website, so those who are there. And also, for those who have not gotten enough information about Megiddo, this first part, go in our archives and find the show that we had with Chris a while back, in which we talk explicitly and at length about the film. Just to clean up some loose ends if we could, so we can let you take it away again. Along with this bit about suspending the elections, in January 7, 2003, let's see. Let me rephrase that. July 24th, 2003. I don't know if you're aware of this. Does the Continuity and Representation Act of 2003 mean anything to you, Chris?
You know what? I have to confess I'm not familiar with it.
All right. Well, as we were talking about suspension of elections, this is what H.R. 2844 is calling for. To require states to hold special elections to fill vacancies in the House of Representatives not later than 21 days after the vacancy is announced by the Speaker of the House of Representatives in extraordinary circumstances and for other purposes. Now, when you go through the bill, they define extraordinary circumstances as, in general, in this subsection, extraordinary circumstances occur when the Speaker of the House of Representatives announces that vacancies in the representation from the states in the House exceed 100. Now, how are you going to have 100 congresspeople vacant? I would think that this portends some kind of event that might be an attack upon the Capitol.
Maybe they all just quit and walked out.
They should have done it a long time ago. So here we have the situation where they're making some kind of provision for the loss of 100 congressmen.
Right.
And of course, you don't have to worry about the senators because the states take care of that in the event that a senator should die, as we saw in Missouri with Carnahan. However, I want to tell you this, that they voted it down. It's gone. Which means now, if this supposed event that they're concerned about occurs, there won't be any provisions for filling in those spots. This is just very strange legislation, don't you think, that's circulating on the Hill?
It seems like it. I mean, I don't want to. I wouldn't want to say. I personally don't want to say too much about it, only because I'm not as familiar with it. I mean, it may be. Yeah, they may have some, sort of plan to wipe out 100 guys in our government, and of course we know from our reports that they have a shadow government that's set up. Maybe they've got people already in place to replace those guys. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I did this not necessarily, like I said, to ambush you and expect an extemporaneous reply, and I told you I wouldn't, and I went ahead and did. But no, the reason I'm also saying this is to make you aware, as well as our listeners, that this legislation was up there for quite some time, almost a full year. And I'm wondering what is the mindset out there that is starting to create this.
Let me understand the legislation, though. They'd have to. Is it 100 congressmen? If they
Yes.
get rid of 100 congressmen all at once, then what happens? They suspend the election?
No, with the suspension of the election goes back to what the AP has just said and what we've been saying for a long time, and that is if there is some kind of tumultuous event, we're not having elections, everything stays pat.
Okay.
And, of course, the problem with that is, one, you're going to probably get martial law with that, and secondly, when do we get back to the election? So you could actually see somebody, like the sitting President, Bush in this case, kind of be pro tem forever. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Now, this one is speaking to some kind of event where you would have a loss of 100 congresspeople.
Huh.
And so, one, I think that's very provocative that they're even thinking like that. And of course, as I said, it was the congressmen themselves voted against it, and they vetoed it, so it's gone.
Oh, so that's no longer.
It's not. Yeah, it's not on the
no
table.
longer a contingency.
Right. So now, if this event that they were trying to make some kind of protocol for is still out there and able to happen, then obviously you've lost a half or more of your legislative branch. So I mean, just the fact that this would be even brought up, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of resonance with these kind of things, and I just want to state it to the public and also to you, because people should be aware that if something occurs, it may not be all as surprised as we are going to be led to believe. So, at any rate, and there's more that we'll talk about before the show is over. But let's go back, if we could, to our departure point when we were talking about property. Now, Harry made the point that why would Jefferson be anti-property since he was behind the creation of the Patent Office. Now, another thing, Chris, is I have a book before me, and it's on the Internet, called Toward an American Revolution, by a Marxist. You'll understand he's a Marxist as you read it, but eventually he says he is. But he's talking about the Constitution and the Founding Fathers in a different light, and Harry and I were talking about this earlier today, and I can see Jefferson and a lot of the Founding Fathers being a bit on the elitist side and perhaps, not necessarily as egalitarian as we are led to believe. So my point is I could see Jefferson being somewhat anti-property for the average person, because is it not true that the United States had something that the feudal monarchies never had, and that was a landed middle class? Your response to that?
Yeah, I tend to agree that Jefferson, his character, the thing that I think we have to be careful about with him, I wanted to say this. He is a sort of contradiction in a lot of different ways, because he was a very manipulative guy. He was a very secretive guy. I watched a documentary. I think the title of it was Founding Brothers, and it was on the whole Founding Fathers and all of them and whatnot. And this was like a History Channel thing, okay? So this was not a conspiracy video. This was like official, representation of the Founding Fathers kind of thing. And when they talked about Jefferson would publish articles and things like that quite often under a false name, okay, because he didn't want people to know that he was expressing certain opinions and views. He would sometimes hire men to go and write articles, like if he wanted to write against George Washington, which he knew to be political suicide because everybody loved Washington, he'd go hire some other guy to write an article and publish it speaking against Washington so nobody would know that Jefferson was actually the guy who was behind it. And he did a lot of this kind of thing. And so why he would, further the patent office or whatnot, I mean, why would he make certain declarations about God and then talk about a wall between, church and state when he's writing the letter to this Baptist minister? So I don't know. I mean, I'd have to study those things to figure Jefferson out. But as far as the elitist view, I mean, if this book is written by a communist guy, the communist argument is always that people who are in control are elitists, and that they're looking down on the people. And so the communist comes in, as they did in the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution and the Chinese Revolution. They come in and they say, hey, look, we're fighting for the rights of the people. But then all they do is turn around and set up their own form of elitism, which is what communism really amounts to. You have a handful of people who are in charge. They make all of the people supposedly equal, but then you've got these guys who are sitting in positions of wealth and power, and they just make themselves the monarchs.
Yeah, they're the capitalists.
Exactly, and they just put themselves in charge. That's all they're doing. But they do it under the pretense of helping the people, and then they turn around and murder the same people that they were supposedly there to help.
And let's remember also that one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto was abolition of property.
Exactly.
All right, we're with Chris Pinto, documentary filmmaker. His latest offering is Megiddo, The March to Armageddon. This is the Grassy Knoll. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
What's with the Canadian fixation tonight?
I had no idea that was a theme running through all this. I apologize.
Well, I'm always looking for the... and I see
the thematic
last guy theme, Canadian. This guy, who's next? Another Canadian?
I know. We have more Canadian people on the show than we do United States citizens.
Maybe that's why we're doing it.
But we have with us today a bona fide U.S. citizen out of California, Chris Pinto, a documentary filmmaker. Again, as we said, he has produced Megiddo, The March to Armageddon. And all of you out there, and for you also, Chris, I mean, we have thunder, we have lightning. And, Chris, if we do drop for whatever reason, please call right back in on that number, okay?
Okay, I'll do it.
Because it's already happened to us. We were winding up the whole thing about property, and I had said to Harry during the break, it's a possibility that Jefferson, like a lot of great men, Franklin also, Lincoln, may have been conflicted, may have been more than just one person, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Whether they changed hearts or whether they told people what they wanted to hear or whether they just considered this, all that was out there. And I said to Harry that possibly Jefferson treated spirituality much like philosophy. Do you know what I mean?
I think so. What do you mean by he treated spirituality much like philosophy?
Well, yeah, and I'm sorry if I wasn't really clear about that, but, there's a lot of people who dally with Christianity and Judaism and Buddhism. In other words, they're philosophers, but they also treat religion also as philosophy and not really as a salvific or a soul, turning experience.
Right. Yeah, I think, rather than, Jefferson definitely had he felt that he had a license to go in, like, of course he wrote the Jefferson Bible. Wherein he's basically changing, the scriptures as they had been written. So he felt that he had the right to go in, and he didn't necessarily receive the teachings of the Bible as being divine. As been, God has set them forth through His prophets and so on. And he obviously did not heed the warnings in the Scripture about, not adding to or taking away from the Word of God. And so he felt that, as you said, the word philosophy means the love of man's wisdom.
Right.
And so he felt that he could just exercise his own view and go in and, do his own personal version of what he believed the truth ought to be. So And yeah, he may have had that view concerning the rights of the people and the idea of property and so on, but he was such a manipulative character from the stuff that I've read on him, even the official stuff that's supposedly written by people who thought that Jefferson was a brilliant, and wonderful founding father. Even the stuff that everybody openly admits to is very. A lot of it, I think, is very disturbing because he was not an openly honest, straightforward guy.
Can you give us an example?
Well, the example being the writings that he manipulated, where he would hire other people to go in and write these articles and to represent ideas that he wanted to be communicated, but he wasn't willing to put his name on them openly because he was concerned about his own political career.
How does that differ from any politician we have today?
Well, it may not differ, but it's certainly not an ideal or a standard that we should look to or admire. And I agree with William Still on this, because Still's a big he does not approve of Jefferson, that we ought to reconsider Jefferson's place in American history and exactly what did he do. I mean, there are certain things like the Louisiana Purchase where, okay, that's a pretty amazing feat to have done that, but what example does he give for future generations, and how should he be regarded, especially if we're going to, because he's regarded by Bible-believing Christians as having been a godly man, as it were. And I think that is something that is questionable. It does not seem that he did not hold himself to be a Bible-believing Christian man, and he did not hold himself accountable to the standards that are set forth in the Scripture. So we can say that, from a democratic view, that, okay, well, he has the right to be the sort of person he wanted to be. I think that's fine. And people can admire him as having been this brilliant individual, and I do believe he was brilliant. But brilliance is not necessarily righteousness. It doesn't necessarily... I mean, Satan is a brilliant creature that God created, but he's certainly not an example that I would want to follow.
I think, not that I mean this to be that they were duplicitous, but I do believe, and I was also saying to Harry during the break, that Franklin also kind of liked it both ways as far as being secular and worldly, and also, I'm not saying feigning, but also showing a spiritual side to himself. And as Harry said, kind of tongue-in-cheek, and that is, with this kind of bifurcated personality, what difference, does that make from any other politician? And I think we would have to agree to a certain extent. We have about 4 minutes left in this first hour, and Chris, can we go back for you to sum up the series that you are in the midst of producing?
Sure. The series is intended to be a somehow or other. When I started this whole thing, I thought I could contain the subject matter within a 2 or 3 hour documentary, and then I realized just what folly it was to attempt such a thing. So I broke the series up into 5 parts. I spent a number of years interviewing different researchers and writers, people who I thought had an understanding of what was going on, and went and just conducted all these interviews with guys like Dave Hunt, Tom McMahon, William T. Still, Eric Phelps. I've got a few hours interview with him after I read his book.
And you lived to talk about it, huh?
Yeah, yeah. And a number of others, Carol Matriciana of Jeremiah Films, a guy named Pastor Joe Schimmel, who exposes Satanism in the music industry in his documentaries. And got all of these guys together, and I got, probably better than 10 hours and more interviews with them, and then just decided to do a series. So part 1 is explaining from a biblical view the New World Order, showing where it's prophesied in the Bible, and then, of course, unfolding a lot of the information that people like yourselves teach and talk about in your ministry, just talking about how this New World Order, this one world government is coming to pass in our day. Part 2 deals with the New Age movement, which gets into the theology and the belief system that has, progressed from over the last 200 to 300 years, primarily in the West, and just showing the progression of it and what the Bible said would be happening, And this focuses more on, what the Bible talks about in terms of a one-world religion, because that's the direction that I believe all of this is going in. And I agree with those teachers who see that as well. Things like, the Pope gathering in Assisi with all of these religious leaders of, Islam and Hinduism and witch doctors and fire worshipers and all these different people, and joining hands and saying we're all praying to the same God. So part 2 deals with the New Age movement. Part 3 is right now it's sort of a toss-up. It's planned to be to talk about Antichrist, the figure, the biblical character of Antichrist, and exactly what does the Bible say about the Antichrist versus a lot of the urban legends that are told about Antichrist. And there, I think primarily of Nostradamus. Usually when you talk to people about Antichrist, they will they'll sort of blend in Nostradamus' idea of this guy with a blue turban who comes from the east and whatnot, which is not at all a biblical profile for that